Hellespot Manager can be a challenging role on a fire. The position used to have a task book and be a red card qualification. Due to staffing availability, these duties were ultimately rolled into the helicopter crew member task book. Hellespot operations are also becoming less common due to many factors such as increasing road access and indirect firefighting tactics. This poses a challenge as there is less and less opportunity for firefighters to gain consistent on-the-job experience. This module will cover the important duties and considerations for establishing and managing a helispot, a crucial role in wildland firefighting.
When considering helispot location, there's a number of factors to consider, and a lot of them are situationally dependent, but there are a few that will apply regardless of the situation or location. The best place to find those is the IRPG in the blue section. There's some great aviation-related material there, and I use it even with 20 plus years to refer to. We've got a lot of guides, a lot of checklists in fire and aviation, and we can't retain it all. But if you know where to go to look to find information, that'll really help you out. So the first question I ask is, what type of helicopters are you anticipating using that helispot? Is it type 1, type 2, type 3? Because they will have different factors depending on what aircraft is using it. So for a type 1, you're going to want a safety circle of 110 feet and a touchdown pad of 30 by 30. For type 2s, your 205s, 212s, kind of the backbone of our federal fleets, you're looking at a 90-foot safety circle and a 20 by 20 touchdown pad. Type 3s, 407s, A-stars, helicopters like that, 75-foot safety circle and a 15 by 15 touchdown pad. So in addition to the actual helispot, you also want to look at approach and departure. Two-way is ideal, meaning the helicopter can come in from one direction and leave the opposite direction. The reason for this is helicopters take off and land into the wind. We do use one-way helispots, but if we can achieve a two-way helispot, then that's definitely preferable. Some other things to consider: you want a flat, clear area. You don't want it excessively rocky. You don't want a lot of brush, a lot of stumps, things that can get caught on a skid or wheel if you have a wheeled aircraft. So you want it flat and you want it clear. Another big consideration is dust abatement. Do you have natural ground cover, grass that'll keep dust down, or is it bare earth where you're going to get a lot of dust? And if you do need dust abatement, how viable is that? Is there a pump that you can set up nearby? Is there a road where you can get a water tender to support that dust abatement? And if there's a road, should it even be a helispot? Can you drive there? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe the road's more dangerous than the aviation exposure to fly in and out. But there are a number of things to consider for helispots with the ultimate goal of being safe, effective operations. You also want to consider having the items that you need at the helispot. You need a wind indicator, crash rescue, fire extinguisher, pad marker. So do you have those items? And if you don't, can you get them relatively quickly? And another question that I always ask myself in helispot location and considerations is expected duration. Is it going to be a one-time use and then we're never going to use it again? Or is it likely to be used day in and day out for crew shuttles? That'll also help me determine my location. Some other things to consider that aren't in the IRPG when selecting helispot location are things like coordinating with your line supervisor, whether it's a division, operations, IC, and kind of have an idea of strategy and tactics. You want that helispot location to remain viable tomorrow and maybe next week. You know, if you have a helispot and it's not going to get used due to plans changing, strategies or tactics changing, or just fire perimeter growth, you need to have the ability to anticipate that and try to select locations that will remain usable so you're not having to identify and establish new helispots daily. Some areas that I like to avoid: excessively dusty areas, or areas that are in the black. From a fire operations standpoint, the black is the safest spot, but for aviation, that creates a hazard. You have brownout conditions and the pilots lose visibility as they're taking off and landing. And again, if you have the dust abatement, you might be able to make that work. It's just something to evaluate. Other areas I like to avoid are congested areas, areas near public access points, near camps, whether it's a spike camp, base camp, ICP, or even residential areas where you're going to have a lot of public. Another common challenge in selecting helispot location and getting approval is confusion on naming conventions and Latin long formats. So typically, On our incidents, the aircraft will prefer degrees decimal minutes. That's what works for them versus degrees minutes seconds. Another challenge sometimes is evolving plans and shifting priorities. A lot of times that's unavoidable. It's based on fire behavior and resource availability that dictates strategy and tactics. Then you just need to be flexible and realize that as the fire grows, needs are going to change, priorities are going to shift. Is it still the best plan? Are we using the right tool for the job? Communication is very critical when you're staffing a helispot. The bottom line to remember is that you do need to communicate with your line supervisor, whoever that might be. And the reason for this is accountability and safety. As a division or heli-base manager, it's important to know who's assigned to you and where they're at for safety reasons. If plans change, if missions change, if fire activity increases or picks up, it's important that people know where you are and that they're able to communicate with you. On a slow helispot, it's easy to become complacent. You need to be aware of this and stay engaged. As I said earlier, you are part of a tactical mission out there, and you need to stay up to date on what's going on with the fire. You need to be scanning the appropriate channels. When you're staffing a helispot, it's good to establish and maintain radio communication right from the start. Have an IAP, have extra batteries, do a comms check. One thing to be aware of that's pretty common is communicating via text or phone calls. And a lot of times you'll see this, somebody on helispot communicating with their crew supervisor, not necessarily their line supervisor or the heli-base manager. So be aware if it's communication that needs to be over the radio because it's tactical in nature and other people need to be aware. Don't do that over text or over a phone call. And be aware of communicating only with your crew supervisor. If you're working for the heli-base manager or division, communicate with them. Several times in my career, I've experienced helispots that were really busy and exceeded my span of control. And the thing to remember, like a lot of our fire and aviation positions, when you're staffing and managing a helispot, that is your responsibility to manage and do the best you can until somebody with more experience or higher qualifications comes and takes it from you. When I found myself in the position of staffing and managing a helispot that was exceeding my span of control, I relied on other helicopter crew members to help. You might get them off other crews at the heli-base, or you might have them on the crews that you're shuttling in or out. One important key is that a helispot manager is no longer a position. Helicopter crew members take on that responsibility and fill that role. So it's good to rely on your more experienced HECMs, and it can be more of a leadership position than people expect. And so the key is to delegate and use the folks that are available to you and put them to work. If you're feeling overwhelmed when managing a helispot, there are a few things that could help. And one of those is anticipating and trying to plan ahead. Now, that's not always possible. Fire and aviation, as you all know, is dynamic and plans continually change. But to the extent possible, if you can anticipate those changes and plan ahead, you'll set yourself up for success. Now, one key thing to remember is to expect curveballs. Things will change. You can have a great plan, but expect a helicopter to be reassigned, expect a helicopter to be down for maintenance, expect a helicopter to be reprioritized due to fire activity. So the loads you had built for a 205, at the last second, you might find out that you're going to be using a 407 and an A-Star. The key to remember is to not get frustrated. Just expect those changes, work with them, and rely on your training and safety fundamentals. LCES is critical on helispots. We often think of helicopter operations as logistical, but when you're staffing a helispot and managing a helispot, it is tactical. You're on the fire line and you need to have and maintain LCES. And perhaps communication out of that is the most critical key. If it's spotty communication or difficult to hit a repeater, it's difficult to communicate with your division operations or whoever you're working for. Another common area of confusion is intended use for a helispot. We hear the terms helispot, medevac site, sling site. So to me, if a helicopter is going to land there and you're going to put it on a map or have it even in the back of your mind as a plan, that helicopter could get in there, it's a helispot. So in my mind, either it's a helispot or it's not a helispot. Either helicopter can get in or it cannot. So a sling spot is a sling spot. That's external cargo coming in. But we hear the term medevac site as being a site we'll only use if needed. But the fact is, if you're using that, a helicopter is going to come in and land. So it's a helispot. So again, refer to the safety specs that we covered earlier that you can find in the IRPG and make it a helispot. If you are concerned that things might be unsafe or progressing to the point where they'll be unsafe imminently, it's important to speak up and get feedback. Ask the pilots as they're coming in if they're aware of hazards, or if the winds are picking up, what is their comfort level? If you do feel that things are unsafe, you need to speak up. If you see something, say something. Don't assume that pilots are aware of hazards. There's things that you can lead up to recommend a better plan for tomorrow if you're doing the same thing. Communicate that to your supervisor, maybe the heli-base manager, We've all heard the expression that slow is smooth and smooth is fast, and that really applies to aviation and when you're managing helispot. If you do feel that sense of pressure and urgency, it's important to not cut corners. Maintain your LCES, take the time to continue doing safety circles on your aircraft before they depart. Make sure there's not a seatbelt hanging out the door, make sure that the doors are latched. So you might feel that sense of pressure, but it's still important to do things smoothly and safely.
Whether you are managing a helispot or constructing one, keep this module in mind and be sure to reference the IRPG for some helpful reminders on how to successfully perform these duties.